You can now hear Movie Heaven, Movie Hell on Stitcher. Stitcher is radio on demand. Listen anytime, anywhere. Stitcher is an award-winning free app that lets you listen to all your favourite shows, plus discover from 20,000 news, entertainment and sports shows. You can also create your own custom playlists. Stitcher is available on iOS, Android, Nook, iPad and in over 4 million car dashboards. It's on demand and it's on the go. No downloading, no syncing, no wasted memory. You can stream your favourite podcasts from Stitcher. Don't have Stitcher? Download it free today at Stitcher.com or in the App Store. And please leave us a review and rating on Stitcher. Thank you. Welcome to Movie Heaven, Movie Hell with me, Simon Aitken, and
I'm Keith Eyles, and we're both independent filmmakers that like to talk about other film directors' work.
We are indeed. Before we get on to this week's director, we just got a little announcement to make. We're doing a New Year's special, and we need your help.
Hey.
So the plan is we want you to give us your suggestions for films from the directors we've already talked about. So, say with Paul W.S. Anderson, our first director, we only talked about 4 of his films, and we know that he's made a lot more. So, send us your suggestions, and me and Keith, we're going to pick our favorite ones, and then we're going to talk about them. So, and your prize will be the honor of hearing your name on the podcast.
Oh, how can they resist? I can hear. We're going to get bombarded. I can see this. So, but no, I mean, it is a good opportunity. If you liked one of the directors we've already talked about, and you think, oh, they picked those films, they suck, I wish they talked about this one, then now's your opportunity. So that's good.
So you've got to the end of November to get your suggestions to us. You can send them to us via our Facebook page or by our Twitter page. Don't email it to us. just do it that way. And then we'll be recording it on the 17th of December, and it will be going out on the 31st of December, just in time for New Year's.
Wow, New Year's Eve special. Yeah, that'll be good. Be interesting.
So get those suggestions over to us as soon as possible. And please leave us your name as well, so we know who to credit.
I'm liking it. I'm liking it that this is now becoming an interactive show. Amazing. Rather than a couple of film geeks. So
it's now a whole lot of film geeks.
Yay. Yeah, well, we like geek. Geek is the new chic, so it's all good.
All right, back to our episode.
Indeed.
So I'm going to do a little bit of preamble before we say who the director is, because it's funny. Originally, we were going to do a podcast with Clive and Rob about this director, and for their podcast, it was going to be we were going to look at all of the crime thrillers this director had made, and the last minute, Rob and Clyde decided that they wanted to move in a different direction with their podcasting, and it got cancelled. And I can't talk for yourself, Keith, but I know that I was disappointed because I was looking forward to it. I had done my homework. I was prepared to do all this, and it was just a shame that it got cancelled. But it was the sort of seed for this podcast.
Indeed.
The reason why we wanted to sort of start this podcast and to do it. So, good things come out of situations like that. So
yeah, and it's fair to say, I mean, I absolutely understand why Clive and Rob decided, not to go ahead and to move in another direction. And any listeners out there should really check out their podcast, which is called The A to Z of SFF, which is a science fiction fantasy podcast that they do, which has some very interesting stuff on it. So, we do want to mention our friends and make sure they get credit as well.
That's it. And also check out their previous podcast called The Speakeasy.
Yes, which we're on, aren't we?
We are
Some
indeed.
of them.
We're on a few of the episodes. There's some really good ones. The 2000 AD episode is a classic in my opinion.
Yes, we need to get Rob Wickings maybe on one of ours. We've had Clive several times, so maybe we should get Rob involved as well at some juncture when it's appropriate. Yes, cool.
Indeed.
Excellent.
Right. So, Keith, who is this director?
Oh, who is this mystery director that we've built up now? Well, I have to say, one of my favorite directors, although another one that hasn't actually directed that many films, considering he's been directing since the 70s right up to, he had a film out this year. He's only actually got 19 directing credits, and that is Michael Mann.
That's correct. And out of those 19, I believe that I think it's like 14 are actually films, and the rest is TV.
Absolutely, yes. He did start off with some episodic television work, and the thing I particularly like about Michael Mann is he's a very detail-orientated director. He's a real stickler, a little bit like we were saying about the reason there's a lot of gaps between Kubrick's work when we talked about him. Very similar in terms of research, less varied in terms of types of film, I think. I mean, there is a biopic in there and a period piece and some dramas, but a lot of it is based around sort of crime drama, thriller type work.
Well, this is down to the fact that he had a lot of contacts in that world. I mean, he had family that was in police enforcement. Also, some of the actors he worked with. Is it Dennis Farina?
Yes, yeah.
Was a cop.
Yeah,
Farina. Sorry,
yeah.
Dennis Farina was a cop. So he has a lot of ties with that world.
Yes, no, absolutely. Very much though. A man that does put a lot of research into every project before he undertakes it. Also, does a lot of his own screenplays. He did actually start off as a writer in episodic television. He actually wrote some early episodes of Starsky and Hutch, I believe, is kind of where he started off. His sort of first forte into that sort of police procedural crime action arena, and quite a lot of the movies that he's done, whether they've been adaptations or original pieces of work, are actually penned by him in terms of the screenplay at the very least.
Did you know that he did his film training here in London?
Yes, apparently he did. Absolutely, yeah.
Oh, it's not apparent. It's fact. I worked a few times for the London Film School.
Right.
Well, also known as the London International Film School in Covent Garden, and he is one of their alumni. He had, at that point back in the late 90s, he still had ties to the school. If that's the case now, I don't know, but they certainly put him up front and center whenever I was working at the school. I used to do running jobs for student shoots and stuff. So
right.
I worked for him a couple of times, and yeah, he's an alumni. He learnt his craft here in London, and then went back to the States to sort of put it to use over there.
Wow. Okay. Well, I mean, he certainly is an interesting guy, and there is interviews and various works of his available to buy, and I encourage anyone that's listening to this that's perhaps interested in filmmaking. Again, you could do a lot worse than read some or listen to some of Michael Mann's thoughts on it. I mean, it's fair to say he's not a big guy on laughs. I mean, all of his work is is serious to a ridiculous degree in some cases. I mean, he does take not only the craft seriously, but the subject matters that he works in very seriously. And all of his films, as I said, are intricately detailed, but are also quite serious. So anyone that wants to see a romantic comedy or something like that, Michael Mann is not the man.
No, his subjects are very serious, and they are always dealt in a very serious manner. But I mean, but they're very. I always find that once you start watching them, they're very hard to turn off.
Oh, big time! Absolutely. Well, I mean, even though this is movie heaven, movie hell, I know we'll get into this later, but I find it hard to pick any of his work that I don't actually like. Most of it's pretty engaging, but
yeah, you say that, but I think of late he has been pretty lackluster. I have to say, the last 3 films he made haven't been great.
Yeah, no, I know what you mean. They haven't got the hopefully he's not on one of these declines that we've talked about with a few other directors, but certainly the last couple of installments, although interesting, maybe haven't quite been up there. I mean, it's fair to say the work that we've picked for this are more from his sort of the middle of his career, aren't they? So yeah.
Well, yeah, I mean, it certainly was finding his stride.
Yeah. I mean, this was one of those guys, another one like many that we've talked about, that was very much a part of my, growing up, and very much one of the directors that got me interested in the filmmaking craft and wanting to tell stories and things of that nature, because I really liked the types of films that he made. Been watching them, right the way through.
I wouldn't say that was the same for me. I've had brushes with him when I was a kid, and I was never sort of a big fan. It wasn't until the mid-90s where I really got into Michael Mann. I think I was that age where it really sort of resonated with me. But I think up to mid-90s, I wasn't that kind of interested in his work. And I remember Manhunter used to be advertised all the time on, Fox Video.
Mm-hmm.
They always had part of their, promo video trailer they would have at the beginning of VHSs. There's always the bit with it's your moose sport,
mm-hmm.
And it never really, interested me at that point. But going back and visiting it as an adult, I find it riveting. So yeah, I think it's sometimes, I mean, the comparison to Kubrick in the sense that as a child or a young person, his films are a bit uninteresting. I mean, there's some good stuff in it when I was growing up, but nothing that would sort of keep me interested or coming back. But as an adult, as I say, I find it absolutely riveting, and I love going back and watching his films, even some of these bad ones.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And apparently it was, back to that old Kubrick connection, which we always seem to have in a lot of these podcasts. But apparently it was Kubrick's, Doctor Strangelove that actually kind of made Michael Mann fall in love with movies and pursue that as his career, which is quite interesting. Well, at least according to Wikipedia, which whether or not that's true, I don't know, but it says it on there. So
we've never known the internet to get things wrong.
Oh no, never. It's always completely 100% factual on everything. Actually, I often though for film source stuff, it's usually quite good, because there is a lot of documented stuff out there nowadays. So. Yeah, and Michael Mann is also another one that does like to, for filmmakers, he is quite into doing commentaries on most of his films, and again, very serious commentaries, I might add. But and he's quite happy to do interviews and things of that nature. So again, if you want to find out more about him, there is oodles of information out there, I'm pleased to say.
Right. Well, let's move on to our first pick. So, Keith, What is your pick for movie
Well,
heaven?
you've already mentioned it. When I was doing my manathon for the podcast that we were originally going to do, I kind of went with, again, something that sort of was always around for me, and that was indeed Manhunter. This is one of those films, like we've said on other podcasts, that I dread to think the amount of times I've owned this. I had it on a, I originally saw it on VHS in that era. I owned it on VHS at one point. I've had several different versions of it on DVD, and I'm pleased to say I also have a Blu-ray of it. So it's one of those that I've dipped into quite a few times. This was, of course, made in 1986, and it was the kind of, well, really the first film to adapt any of the Thomas Harris novels, i.e. the Hannibal Lecter series, which is obviously massive nowadays. But this was the one that did it first. This actually did it before Silence of the Lambs, although I think my coming to discover this film and see this film was off the back of Silence of the Lambs. So in other words, I saw Silence of the Lambs, really loved that film, really liked the whole Hannibal Lecter thing, was quite creeped out about it all. And, I think somebody said to me, oh, there's a prequel story to this that Michael Mann did. I was like, really? Okay, wow. I knew Michael Mann, obviously, through Miami Vice and things of that nature, and checked it out. And it is a, well, I love it, obviously, hence why I've owned it so many times. It was produced by Dino De Laurentiis' company. The reason it's called Manhunter is it was originally shot under its title Red Dragon, the same as the novel and the remake that came. But De Laurentiis at the time felt that it sounded a little bit too much like a martial arts movie. And apparently there'd been some like box office flops around that time. So they decided to change it to Manhunter. I don't think Michael Mann had anything to do with that, although quite interesting. Manhunter. There you go. They should have done it with a double N. But yes.
Well, I just want to say on this point, I think the title actually suits the film because it is from Will Graham's point of view.
Very much.
For most of it.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
For preparation for watching this, I went and watched Red Dragon, the remake, the one they made so they could put Anthony Hopkins in the role. And I have to say, of course, straight off the bat, I prefer Manhunter. It's massively two different films. Red Dragon is just, it's not done very well. I know there's people who like it and some people who prefer it over Manhunter, but it's not a very good film. But with Red Dragon, there was a lot more of the serial killer in there. Trying to think what his
Francis Dolarhyde, the Tooth Fairy, which was played by Ray Fiennes in the remake, in the Brett Ratner film.
In Manhunter, the Tooth Fairy is very much somebody who, he has a purpose and he doesn't sort of waver. But yet in Red Dragon, he has this whole thing where, he has a sort of whole mother complex, and Red Dragon's everything's sort of spelt out for you massively. Mm-hmm. There should be like big signs everywhere going ding 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 ding.
Yeah. No, I understand what you mean. I mean, basically, Red Dragon was made to sort of complete the Hannibal Lecter trilogy, if you like, with Anthony Hopkins in, even though, it was like sort of made 12 years after Silence of the Lambs and was supposed to take place like 10 years beforehand. So, and this was before they could sort of make people look younger with CG and whatever. So Anthony Hopkins is clearly older, but
it was kind of comical. So how do we make him younger? We give him a ponytail.
Yes, exactly. I have to say, actually, whilst we're on the subject, though, before we get into Manhunter itself, I actually don't mind the Red Dragon film. I think it's one of the strongest things about that is the screenplay itself, which was done by the same guy that did Silence of the Lambs. It was quite a good screenplay, but the casting of it was quite strong, I feel. I mean, it's got quite a a number of really obviously bankable but also quite good actors in it, and obviously they were trying to sort of tie this into the to the Silence of the Lambs and the Hannibal continuity, which they didn't do too bad a job of. Having said that, it's a completely different style altogether to Manhunter.
Well, what made me laugh was the fact that both films, Manhunter and Red Dragon, have the same cinematographer. It's Dante Spinetti.
That's right. Yeah, exactly.
And they look completely different.
Yeah.
I mean, Manhunter looks amazing, and Red Dragon looked all right.
Yeah, I mean, Red Dragon was kind of done to be sort of, again, to look a little bit like the world they'd set up that Jonathan Demme and Ridley Scott had set up in the sequel movies. And
yeah, but I mean, the thing for me was that the use of shots, because they were a lot more closer in Red Dragon, but they just sort of used that all the time, while the shots in Manhunter, they are picked from a psychological point of view. Oh,
totally.
So, from the start, you see his back to us.
Yeah.
You don't see him facing forward. So, and it's just the way he's positioned in the frame just tells us so much more than dialogue would do. Yet in Red Dragon, a lot of it is just dialogue, and it's like, that kind of dialogue when they say something and you go, "What? Really? I did not know that." It's like, playing to the what's the phrase?
To the masses kind of thing, isn't it? Yeah, it's
yeah, but there's another phase about playing to the back of the house or something.
Oh, right. Yeah. Playing to the exactly, back of the audience sort of thing. But,
or playing to the bleachers or something like that.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was very sort of on the nose.
Playing to the cheap seats, let's say that.
That's it.
But no, I know that's not the actual saying. But no, exactly. It was much less it was a much less stylized adaptation of the story. As I said, I'm a fan of the franchise, so I like it kind of for that reason, more, if you like, than but in terms of Michael Mann's one, I mean, as I've mentioned on other podcasts, a couple of years back, I used to teach media and film production, and one of the classes that used to be on the syllabus was to talk to students. There's a lot of theory stuff, and we used to talk about mise en scene. And I actually would use Manhunter as a prime example of that.
Can I just ask you? This is for me and everybody who don't quite understand what mise en scene means. What does mise en scene mean?
Okay, it's basically, obviously it's from the sort of French New Wave history sort of thing, hence the name. But it's about everything that's within the frame serving the story and character. So it's about everything from the actual composition of the framing to the colors and the textures used to what they're wearing to how everything sets up. In fact, you've already mentioned a great example of it. You can tell a lot about the character's relationship of Will Graham and Jack Crawford, his boss, played by Dennis Farina in this film, simply from that shot where they're sat and they're not facing one another. They're sat opposite each other on that tree stump on the beach, and just things like that. It gives the audience, it's like using the visuals to help tell the story and have, if you like, even deeper context. I mean, there are essays and lectures galore on this sort of thing out there.
And another thing as well. I'm sorry to pick on Red Dragon, but I'm going to pick on you.
Fine.
The beginning of Red Dragon, we get to see Will Graham discovering who Hannibal Lecter is, and him being attacked.
Yes.
And I felt that was just put in there because they wanted to show that.
Oh, it totally was. Yeah, it totally was.
But the thing was, with Manhunter, when you see that first scene, you know straight away there's a history between these two people.
Yeah.
And that Will Graham has left and that he wants to move on, yet Jack Crawford won't let him.
Yeah. No,
And
absolutely.
yeah, but the thing is, though, when you see the same scene in Red Dragon, it's just so it just does not have the same effect. It's not as interesting either.
No, no, absolutely. I mean, I don't think if I had to pick one, Manhunter is my favorite. The thing I like about Red Dragon is well, the story's good, obviously, but I like the fact that I like my continuity, and I like the fact that they've tried to sort of put it within the universes, the Thomas Harris universe continuity. Even though, interestingly, in Silence of the Lambs, um, you get Scott Glenn playing Jack Crawford, and I guess for whatever reason he didn't come back to reprise the role for Red Dragon. So they actually cast Harvey Keitel, who I always think, interestingly, is more like the Dennis Farina version of Jack Crawford from this film. So it's kind of like,
Well, yeah, yeah. Can I ask you, as we're comparing and picking, which performance of Dr. Hannibal Lecter do you prefer?
oh God. Well, I mean, that's difficult. Obviously, with Anthony Hopkins, being the Oscar winner for this and kind of having sort of, I guess, defined the character in sort of popular culture and whatever. But obviously, he wasn't the first to play it. Brian Cox played Hannibal Lecter in Manhunter. Yeah, it was a different performance. It was a much less performed performance, if that makes sense. It was subtle. It was quite matter of fact. Obviously, the setting couldn't have been more different as well, because Michael Mann chose to go with the completely clinical white aesthetic with the white jumpsuit and the completely white cell. Whereas obviously when they got onto Silence of the Lambs, they tried to do something a little bit more creepy and horrific, if you like, with that. But yeah, I mean, it's very different. It's hard to compare them. It would have been, I think it would have been interesting had Silence of the Lambs actually been made as a sequel to this, and whether Brian Cox, who has since been in absolutely everything, but if at the time he'd reprised the role, I don't know. But I can't help but love Hopkins as well.
Well, yeah, I mean, I enjoy Hopkins as Hannibal Lecter. I mean, he certainly did make it his own, but I also like the Brian Cox version as
Yeah,
well. I think it's much better. But when comparing the two films, Hannibal Lecter, well, Anthony Hopkins or Brian Cox in the two different versions of Red Dragon, I actually go with Brian Cox over him because it's a bit more, I don't know, a bit more hammy. I mean, it was a lot more. I think the nice thing they did with Manhunter was not to have him so much in it. Yet with Red Dragon, it was kind of like, well, how can we get Hannibal Lecter back into this story?
yeah, yeah. Oh, it was big time, that. I mean,
Yeah.
his scene was, or his involvement was very much expanded for that. I mean, whilst we're talking about the franchise, if you like, as
Hmm.
I love my television shows as well, and of course it's just finished now. But I was quite intrigued and interested in the television adaptation of Hannibal, which is completely reimagined with Mads Mikkelsen playing, the Hannibal Lecter role. And, Brian Fuller had made this a very, it was a very, if you like, grotesquely beautiful show, meaning it was very, he'd gone very high on sort of visual metaphor and production design and clothing and all of this sort of thing. But they've actually just finished doing another adaptation of Red Dragon, that they
Oh,
finished,
right.
because which they sort of borrowed. I mean, they reimagined it. They changed the fates of some of the characters and stuff from the original novel text material, but they add plenty of homages to, all of the film franchises, including Hannibal Rising, even in there. And it's a shame because the Brian Fuller's original plan for this was to have sort of a 7-season run. So you had like 3 seasons that took place prior to the events of Red Dragon. Okay, so with Hannibal and Will Graham meeting and sort of establishing the characters and the relationship. Then a season that was supposed to be an adaptation of Red Dragon. Then a season that was going to be an adaptation of Silence of the Lambs, and then a season that was going to be a reimagining of Hannibal itself, the film, and then a final season to tie it all up. And I guess, it was clearly quite an expensive show, and what ended up happening was, it got cancelled in season 3, but they kind of knew that. So what they did is they had a time jump and went into the Red Dragon and covered that in sort of 8-episode arc. And they've kind of, I think they're trying to see if Netflix or something will pick it up or a movie or whatever. But it's interesting.
I hope so. I mean, I really enjoyed the show. I mean, I haven't caught parts 2 and 3 yet.
Right.
But I will at some point. But I really enjoyed the first season, and the one thing I really liked about the first season was because Hannibal Lecter was very much part of the team in some sense, that they would always come. Will Graham would always go to him for advice and stuff, and he would always have the team round for dinner.
Yes,
and of course, usually he was serving up somebody. And so I was waiting for that moment where they all realised what they'd been eating over those weeks and months.
Yes, it was wonderfully dark. I couldn't actually believe that it was on network television, because it was very much like a cable show. They even used, like a cable model in terms of 12-episode seasons and stuff. But they really did push it to its limit, I think, in terms of gore and but yes, they at the same time, they had some mouth-watering dishes, which, like you said, is wonderfully dark in terms of most of the time they were victims that he was serving up on a platter. But anyway, I guess I should get back to Michael Mann. But I thought while we were talking about Thomas Harris and the Hannibal Lecter.
Yeah, I mean, you can't not talk about Manhunter and the Hannibal Lecter series of films and the TV series, because they're all part of the same universe, even though we have different people playing Hannibal Lecter, but he is the linchpin of these stories.
Exactly.
And I just would say I've not seen Hannibal Rising, and I had a chance to this week, and I decided not to because I just heard such bad things about it, and I thought, there's better uses of my time.
It's a prequel, that Thomas Harris put out, and they made the film of pretty swiftly after that. And I mean, it gives you some backstory, but overall it doesn't really add much, hence why most people think of it as the trilogy rather than the quadrilogy or whatever. So but yeah, I mean, Manhunter is a film in its own right. It's not trying to be part of that franchise. Michael Mann has definitely put his stamp on this. I mean, stylistically, his use of colors, his use of framing. I mean, Michael Mann very much likes the 2:35:1 aspect ratio, which he uses on pretty much all his films. He's used it here. His use of music and soundtrack in this, again, he'd already experimented with this sort of thing back in the Miami Vice days, which were just prior to this. Miami Vice TV series, that is, not movie. He uses that very well. He uses popular music during graphic scenes and action scenes and things of that nature. And again, some great I mean, Will Graham, who's William Peterson of now CSI fame, but back then when he was young, a decent lead character performance there, I feel.
Decent. I thought he's great. I mean, the thing is he's so focused, but I mean, the other thing as well is that you can see him being drawn into it, and it's all, again, it's all subtlety. It's not these big speeches. They're not. You can see him slowly being drawn back into this, and the thing is, he's a character who, he has empathy for serial killers. He can think like they can think, but it also means that he's very close to that edge, that he could go over that line and become a serial killer himself, but he doesn't. And the reason why he doesn't is because he holds life in such high regard, hence why he hunts these guys.
No, absolutely, and it is a great performance, and apparently, very much pushed for by Michael Mann, because the studios at the time wanted, somebody more bankable, like I think Richard Gere, Mel Gibson, and Paul Newman were all sort of names that were batting around. But Mann cast him after seeing To Live and Die in L.A., and really liked his performance in that, and cast the right guy, I think, for this. And obviously Tom Noonan in this plays Francis Dolarhyde, stroke the Tooth Fairy in this version. Noonan's good at playing creepy roles anyway, because of his demeanor and his size and whatever. Apparently, though, there were some reshoots that were done on this originally, as lots of the marketing material had. They had, as in the remake and of course the novels, the whole tattoo thing going on for the but Michael Mann changed his mind about that, and they actually went back and sort of refilmed those scenes, those shirtless scenes for him without without the tattoo,
which I think is a good choice. I don't think it worked in Red Dragon. I mean, it was actually kind of funny, which I don't think would have worked, because Tom Noonan's character was so, he's so scary anyway, you could believe it. I mean, this is the problem I had with Red Dragon again, is just that, Ralph Fiennes playing, as much as he's a good character actor, I don't think he was the same as Tom Noonan. I think Tom Noonan's performance was so more believable. You could, he was a scary guy, while Ralph's performance was, you're feeling a bit of empathy for him. But when take the scene where they have the Freddie Lowndes character, you have the scene with Tom Noonan and Stephen Lang, absolutely tense as anything. You take the same scene with Philip Seymour Hoffman and Ralph Fiennes, it was comical. It was it was like Philip Seymour Hoffman was scared of a naked guy.
Yeah. I must admit, I think I always thought it was an unusual choice to have Ralph Fiennes play that role. Not that there's anything wrong whatsoever with Ralph Fiennes' acting. He's a superb actor. It's more the fact that I wasn't sure that physically he looked right for the character, because, like you said, he looks more of a normal guy, not so much of a guy that would have been, this sort of tortured character that Dolarhyde is. So. Yeah, I mean, they kind of followed that model more in the TV show as well. They've gone with the tattoo, although it's more of a moving metaphor as well in the TV show, and it's played by Richard Armitage, who's more of a sort of, I guess, Ralph Fiennes type. Yeah, interesting. I mean, obviously the source material, of course, had the tattoos in the books and things of that nature, but I didn't think there was anything wrong with the way they did it in Manhunter. In fact, I thought it actually worked quite well.
Yeah. I mean, you had enough of that imagery anyway. I mean, when he does the slideshow, I think that works so well. And he is a character who's becoming, something. It's like he's a caterpillar turning into a butterfly, and so. You didn't need. I don't think the tattoo helps at all. I'm sure as people will say, "Oh, but it was in the book." Yeah. Well, as we've learned over these podcasts, that sometimes what works in a book doesn't work in a film.
Exactly, different mediums. But yeah, I mean, again with this one, Michael Mann actually did the screenplay, based on Harris's novel. But there were some changes. But yeah, I just think the film, is visually stunning. I like the story, and And, you know, I just like the way, again, he's taken a really serious approach to this. You know, he's gone well overboard on details. You know, it's quite, at the same time, it's quite minimalist as well. Like, you know, the Hannibal Lecter cell scene is, you know, they're like chalk and cheese if you watch, you know, that and the Hopkins version. And, you know, I'm not saying either is right or wrong. I just think that, you know, Michael Mann made some interesting choices. And, you know, I think it's a beautifully photographed film with a great soundtrack and you know, some decent performances. So if for me it was an easy one, you know, Michael Mann's filmography, there's a lot in there that I like and a lot of contenders for movie heaven. But yeah, I felt that this one was the one for me to choose. And if anybody hasn't seen it, I recommend it highly.
Did you notice the one actor who's been in all 4 of these films?
Oh, what, the guy that plays Barney in the
Frankie Faison?
That's it,
yeah.
Frank Faison. Yeah,
he turns up as a lieutenant at the end.
That's right. Yeah,
and it was like, oh my god, it's Barney.
Yes, yeah. No, it's great that you know, for him as an actor, that he's been able to be in all of them, if you like. But yeah. I mean, it's you know, the attention to detail of this film. I mean, obviously, yes, it's dated because it's clearly set when it was set, and you know, a lot of it is to do with profiling and you know, they're running around with fax machines and you know, stuff like that. But
still, though, that
know,
is part of the tension.
It is.
Yeah. I mean, you know, those little things. I think it's aged very well.
Yeah.
I don't think. I mean, I think another film of his that we're going to talk about has aged really badly.
Mm-hmm.
But not. I don't think Manhunter. I mean, Manhunter really works, and you know, it's a great film.
Yeah. Well, as I said, it's one of those that's always in my collection, whichever medium it's on, and you know, it's one of those as well that I think I've said this before, but you know, there are certain films that if they happen to be on television and I'm channel flicking or whatever, and it's on, I watch it even though I own it. It's just one of those films that I can't help but that sit and watch and I'm fairly gripped by. So yes. You know, I really could go on about this for ages, but you know, bottom line is I think it's great. And Michael Mann did a fantastic job. So yeah, good on him.
He did, and I think would have been my pick if you hadn't got there first.
Aha, okay, fair enough.
But I equally like my pick. So it's another crime thriller from '95, and it's the film Collateral.
That's 2004. Collateral.
Oh, sorry.
Right? Yeah.
Sorry, 2004. I've been corrected.
Sorry. Well, you know, you'd only listen to this back when you later and be damn, I got that wrong, like we all do sometimes. You know what I mean? So yes,
I know, but I could actually go back and re-record it if I want.
You could, but you don't do that, do you, Simon?
No, I never do that. We get all our facts are right or wrong kept in.
Yeah, exactly. often embarrassingly wrong sometimes, but there you go.
Anyway, so back in 2004, I'd been making films for a while, and I've been using a lot of like digital cameras in my work, and at this point they hadn't really been used in feature films. There had been like the odd one, but I think at this point we had 28 Days Later. We had there was a film called Hotel that came from Mike Figgis, and he was very much into his sort of digital cameras. He did like another one that was like
Time Code. Yeah,
Time Code. Thank you very much. Yeah. And so digital was kind of creeping in, and this was a film that actually, you know, embraced digital technology and used it really well. The film takes place on one night in LA, and straight away you are introduced to Tom Cruise, who plays Vincent. And the thing about Michael Mann films is that he likes characters called Vincent. The name has popped up a few times now. And Vincent's in his films, they're always sharks. They're always dressed in grey. They're always in smart suits. They're professionals. These are people you don't fuck with. They're killers. And just from that brief intro at the airport where Tom Cruise bumps into Jason Statham.
Oh yeah. Is it the character from The Transporter? That's the question.
People do say that. They say, yeah, it's the Transporter. Could be. It could be just a weird choice of actors, but it's quite fun little cameo at the beginning.
Nice job for Statham, absolutely.
That's it, yeah. And then we're introduced to Max, who is, at the end of the day, he is the heart of the picture. He's the person that we relate to the most, because he's been thrown into this situation with this, I wouldn't say he's a psychopath, but he's a sociopath. He's somebody who doesn't see what's wrong with what he's doing. He's going around killing people and he's making money out of it. And, what's wrong with that?
Yeah, no, absolutely.
We're introduced to a side of LA we don't normally see. And the use of locations in this film is really well done. I mean, especially when we get into the nighttime photography, driving past LAX and seeing the planes landing and just sort of the cityscapes themselves. I mean, the city is a character in the film. And so if you don't know the story is that Max picks up Vincent, and Vincent convinces him to stay with him and go to all these drops. And it turns out that Vincent is a hitman and he's knocking these people off. And the nice thing is that Jamie Foxx does everything in his power to stop him. He's not a willing participant because he learns quite quickly what's going on, and he has a problem with it. And of course the threat is that Vincent will kill him and get somebody else to do it, because he kills very easily. But the great thing about this film is that you get to know Max and Vincent very well. I mean, these are two characters you get to know really well, because a lot of the time is spent in that cab, and their relationship and their sort of worldviews. And because Max is kind of a dreamer. He's driving a cab, but he has bigger plans, but yet he's still driving a cab. He says to Vincent, "Oh, this job's only part-time." And Vincent says, 12 years seems to be a long time for it to be part-time.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, you're absolutely right. This is, for the most part of the film. I mean, yes, there's some action sequences and whatever, but you're right. A lot of it is literally two people in a car talking, but absolutely engaging. I mean, Jamie Foxx is a fantastic actor, and I have to say, Tom Cruise, this to me is one of his strongest performances. I think, his portrayal of Vincent in this is really, really nicely measured. It's a measured performance and works really well.
I don't mind Tom Cruise. I mean, there's people who don't like him, but I quite like him. Yeah, I think he does a really good job, because he is playing against type, because Tom Cruise is usually all smiles and look at me, I'm handsome, and I'm sort of the center of attention and stuff like that. And this, where he's actually trying to not be noticed at all.
Yeah, I mean, he's not. You're right. I mean, a lot of people rag on him, and I think it is because of that. Often he'll make films that are essentially Tom Cruise wank fests, as I've heard them. Where he's surrounded by girls half his age, and he's smiling and perfect and all this sort of thing. But we know he's a good actor from some of the roles earlier in his career, and I think when he's with a serious director and a decent script, and he is clearly a very professional guy who puts his all into a project. And I think this stands out as certainly his career sort of post 2000. This is one of the strongest performances. I mean, don't get me wrong, I love the Mission Impossible franchise, but that's for whole other reasons. But
I enjoyed Jack Reacher. I mean, I'm a fan of the book, and I've read loads of them, and of course the description of Jack Reacher in the books and Tom Cruise
polar opposites, yeah.
But Tom Cruise pulls it off.
He does. I agree. I think so as well. I think that's a decent film.
But I mean, this period he was working with some really interesting directors. I mean, he worked with Paul Thomas Anderson on Magnolia. He'd done Minority Report with Steven Spielberg, and of course he had done Eyes Wide Shut with Stanley Kubrick before this film. So he'd been working with a lot of really good directors, and sort of, I think in some way putting his ego at the back of the room, and being sort of putty in the hands of these directors, because those films he's really good in them.
Yeah,
I mean, it's not the as you put it, the cruise wank type of films, but but those are I think are the bread and butter films.
No, exactly. I mean, I didn't mean, if that's sort of an unfair comment, I actually really like Tom Cruise's work.
Yeah, so. I know people who say that as well. There's a lot of people, and also his actions in the real world are very questionable, and I mean that whole Oprah Winfrey incident. Yeah, I mean, jumping up and down the couch saying how much he loved old what's her name,
Katie Holmes. Yeah.
We know how that all turned out.
Yeah, well, let's not go there, eh?
No, but I mean, I think, but they do colour how people perceive him in his roles.
I think so, but he's definitely a career professional who puts a lot into the films that he produces, whether he's acting in them or not. And I think he's great in this, and you can tell he 100% trusts Michael Mann as the filmmaker. I mean that's the thing. We've talked on other podcasts about acting, and this is one of the points I always keep meaning to make with acting in film. Obviously, actors bring a lot to everything, but of course, there's only so much you can do. At the end of the day, there's so much out of your control, in the filmmaker's hands, that you have to be in a pair of hands that you trust, really. And clearly, with to bring it back to Michael Mann, with some of Tom Cruise's choices in his career, we can see that he certainly does make good choices with what directors to work with.
Oh, indeed. I mean, I think one of the things that Michael Mann does, which I in some ways kind of envious of, because I never have the time to do it, but he does a lot of rehearsal, and he likes to train the actors. So if I own Collateral on Blu-ray, and there's a whole lot of making of stuff on there, and with Tom Cruise, they sent him to gun training. They got him to fire all kinds of weapons because they wanted him to be, just matter of fact with the guns and shooting. It's this is an everyday thing for him. It's nothing out the blue. It's not some big moment. I mean, he's in the film. Vincent is a very good marksman. I mean, he always does a double tap in the chest and one in the head, and that is sort of his signature. And the scene where Max is tied up in the cab, he's got his hands tied to the steering wheel, and he's calling for help. And of course, these douchebags come over and try and rob him. And Vincent comes along. And he goes, "Hey, bro, you got my my case?" And of course, the guy sticks a gun in his face, and he shoots him straight away. He's such a quick draw, but the way he shoots the last guy, he doesn't even look at him. He just puts one in his head and walks away. And it's just it was cold, just absolutely cold, the way he sort of did the killing. Also, another thing he did was Michael Mann got him to deliver a FedEx parcel, didn't they?
Yes, yeah, that's right.
And so he had to do this and try not draw attention to himself, because it's Tom Cruise.
Yes.
I thought that was quite fun. But yeah, seeing there's a nice piece on the Blu-ray where you see Michael Mann rehearsing with Tom Cruise, Jamie Foxx, and Jada Pinkett, and you can see them sort of getting the performances there, and it's quite nice. And he would do like a room reading, and then he'd get them into a car and do it there, and all that kind of stuff. And it's nice in the Blu-ray where they sort of show you a comparison to the rehearsals to the actual scenes, and you can kind of see where they kind of where they went with it and stuff. It was really nice.
Well, this is why I like and respect directors like Michael Mann, is the fact that he clearly has explored and thought about everything, every single aspect, and there's nothing worse than when you're an actor, and I've experienced this on stuff where you've actually, as the actor, thought more about the scene and the character and what's going on in the scene than the actual filmmaker, and you think to yourself, what the fuck is wrong with this picture? You know what I mean? You're supposed to I'm not saying that every director has every single answer for everything, but you should have at least explored what you're trying to say in each scene. You know what I mean? So, and Michael Mann, absolutely, yeah. You look at any extras or behind the scenes with him. Even I watched recently a little featurette that was on YouTube where he was basically Colin Farrell and is it Gong Li, the girl from Miami Vice?
Yes.
They were having salsa dance training for the again, it's great being a professional actor and having all this gun training, dance training, fucking brilliant. But no, they were being trained for the Cuba scene, and what was great is you had obviously the dance choreographers and everything in there, teaching them the moves and all of this sort of thing, but Michael Mann was there for this whole thing, and you see him not only talking about the dancer moves, but what that's saying about where they are and the character and all. He actually gets to the point where Colin Farrell goes, "Oh, come on, man, get the fuck out of here," or something, which is that's typical Colin Farrell, I guess.
I have to say, some great supporting actors in this.
Oh, yeah.
And I think the sort of standout is Mark Ruffalo,
definitely,
as the detective. Now, so you've got Tom Cruise and Jamie Foxx driving around and doing all these hits, but you see the police sort of following the trail of bodies. Mark Ruffalo's character, Fanning, is the only one who thinks that something's wrong with this picture, because they get to a point where they believe that Jamie Foxx is Vincent. And that point is when Jamie Foxx has gotten the list off him and thrown it away, and Vincent needs the list to continue his job. So they go to this bar where is it Javier Bardem?
Yes, that's right. Yeah. He plays a character called Felix, I think, or something. Yeah,
that's it. Yeah. Yes. And but because Vincent don't meet people, anonymity is his shield. He is he's a man who stays very much in the shadows. I mean, there's a bit of dialogue in that Fanning says about, do you ever buy that taxi cab driver who went crazy and started killing all those people? So you had this sort of foreshadowing of what was going to happen to Max if he, continued on with Vincent, unaware or not trying to get away. He would have ended up with, being blamed for these murders and a bullet in his head. But they think he's Vincent, and but Mark Ruffalo believes he's not, believes that there's somebody else involved. And he's like a glimmer of hope for Max in the film, especially in the club scene. And you just he gets to Max, doesn't he?
Yeah.
He's getting him out. You think, oh, he's gonna be saved now. And Vincent just takes Fanning out like that.
Yeah. No, absolutely.
And that's it. And he's gone.
No.
And then it's just Max and Vincent. and there is nobody coming to Max's rescue, and it's so good. And the way the film handles that as well is brilliant, because Max realizes that he has to do something, otherwise he's not going to see the morning.
No, absolutely. I mean, back to Mark Ruffalo. I love Mark Ruffalo anyway. I think he's great, and in this, he's particularly strong. I mean, this was, you know, he's almost chameleon-like in so much as because Michael Mann spends a lot of time on how the look of the character should be. I mean, back to what you were saying about the grey suits and things of that nature. You know, he'd come up with this specific look for the Fanning character, and you know, it's you know, you don't instantly look at it. I mean, when you hear his voice, it's Ruffalo, but you know, you don't instantly look at it and say, oh look, it's Mark Ruffalo, because he's got a different vibe going on. And then great performance, absolutely.
Yeah. Well, I mean, why you don't sort of recognize him at first is because he's undercover cop and he looks Puerto Rican, and he's sort of speaking dialogue in Spanish.
Exactly.
So you don't really, so it throws you a bit. But then once he pulls out his mobile phone and says, you know, is this Officer Fanning? And you go, oh right, yeah, Mark Ruffalo.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
Why I picked this for Movie Heaven was I remember the reaction I had coming out of this film, and I remember coming out of this film with a high. I loved it, and I thought it was great, and the storytelling was just so compelling, and I had such a good time watching it. And at the end of it, it was, you know, it's that feeling when you know you've just come out and you've seen a really good film, you've seen a great film, and you're going, I am so sad. I'm so glad I watched that in the cinema.
Oh, definitely. Yeah.
And I remember going home afterwards, and I was in such a high. It's brilliant. And I mean, I don't get the same high each time when I watch it now, because you can only get that once. But I still like coming back to this film once in a while and watching it, and I still enjoy it. And I think it's a great film. And as I said, my starting piece, you know, was sort of started the herald the use of digital cinematography in a sense that you can make a whole film using this technology. And you know, I know there's a few scenes in there that they use film to shoot on, but you know, to think now that we see films all the time being shot with digital cameras.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, you know, one of the interesting things, like you said, I think this is a very strong choice and contender for Movie Heaven. But you know, Michael Mann is very much a classic, you know, old school style filmmaker, very much, and you know, as we said, likes to shoot, you know, anamorphic and things of that nature. But at the same time, you know, he has been one of those that has really embraced you know, the digital technology and you know, got very good results from it. I mean, I think it was the Viper camera that he used back on this.
It was the Viper,
yeah. And you know, at that stage, I mean, it kind of sounds ridiculous now, but you know, 11 years ago, you know, this was still, you know, quite experimental.
It was, as we said, there wasn't many films at this point being shot with digital cameras, and if they were all these sort of pro-consumer ones, so they always had a very video look to them, and they didn't have like such a cinematic look, which this film does. I have to say though, I do notice the reshoots in this film, and you can always tell because Tom Cruise's hair and beard and eyebrows suddenly get a lot darker.
Yeah, okay.
And it's kind of funny because you think, you know, okay, I know it's reshoots, but could they have not? They should have been able to use the same makeup artists. Should have been able to do the same, you know, effects. It's like I can always tell what shots are the reshoots in Phantom Menace. You just have to look at Ewan McGregor, and if he looks like he's been stung by a bee, that's the reshoot.
Yes.
But because they couldn't cut his hair, could they? He'd grown it long for a theatre show he was in, and so they had to make this elaborate wig to make his hair short. But to stick all that hair in there, it made it look like he'd just been stung by a bee.
Yeah, yeah.
So it's a little distracting, those shots, and they're always shots within the cab as well, so they sort of a little bit jarring, and it's just like, you know, what were they thinking? Was it the fact that he was doing something else and he couldn't dye his hair?
Quite possibly. I mean, it's not as bad that the worst movie for Tom Cruise in terms of hair continuity, and it really makes me laugh, is Cocktail, because they did reshoot to that while he was making I think Rain Man or something at the same time. And you know, there's a scene where he goes into an elevator with his hair actually, you know, cropped in at the back, like clippered in, right? When he gets into the elevator, it's shoulder length, and then when he comes out, it's cropped in again, and it's like, what the fuck, you know? But again, I know that was because of a reshoot and him not being able to change, you know, his hair for. Hey, at least in Phantom Menace, George Lucas didn't fix the hairstyle with CGI. At least.
Wow. Yeah.
That's, yeah. But no, interesting. But yeah, I love it. I've watched Collateral several times and watched all the extras on Collateral are very good, and the commentary track on that one is great as well. So yeah, good choice. No disagreement so far. I'm with you 100% on this. So yeah.
Excellent. Right, well, let's move on to movie hell. So, Keith, what is your pick for movie hell?
All right. Well, you know, in standard Keith fashion, you know, Keith, it's kind of movie heaven, movie. Well, it's okay, but I picked it for a reason, which is a long title. But no, with this one, I thought this would be really interesting to talk about because it also allows me to talk about another Michael Mann film on this podcast that was a contender for heaven as well. So, but what I've chosen to talk about, and I've put it in the hell category, is a film called LA Takedown, which was made in 1989. Reason this is quite interesting is this is actually a television movie. It was originally made as a possible pilot for a series that didn't end up happening. Obviously, Michael Mann had come off two sort of popular series at this time. He'd done obviously Miami Vice, and he'd also done Police Story. Is it Police Story?
No.
Crime Story. Crime Story. I'm sorry, Crime Story.
Police Story is the Jackie Chan film.
That's right, it is. Yes, he didn't do that. Definitely not his style. Yeah. So, but the thing is, and you know, a lot of people already know this is part of cinema folklore. Is you know, there have been directors over the years that have actually, you know, we talk about remakes all the time, but there have been directors that have actually remade their own work over the years. I mean, Hitchcock, who did most things, you know, he did that with which one was it? It was the man you knew too much, wasn't it?
That's right. Yes.
Obviously, people like Michael Haneke have done it. Other directors foreign directors, they've often made the English language remake, etc., of their films as well. But this film was obviously remade into one of Michael Mann's best films. Again, a big contender for heaven, which is the film Heat. You know, with Al Pacino and Robert De Niro, which is an absolute classic.
So I just want to interrupt, but this is the first time I watched it.
Oh, okay, yeah.
And I've known of it of years, but I also knew how bad it was. And watching it, it does feel like a dry run for Heat.
It is, yeah. It's like a blueprint. It's a prototype for Heat. It's very much like, it was quite interesting that comment you were making earlier about how he likes to rehearse. And, you know, obviously it's a very expensive way of doing it. But, you know, he almost said, I've seen an interview about this, and he's almost said that he almost wishes he could do this with every film because, you know, it kind of gets the groove out for it. But I mean, essentially what had happened was he had written this script back in the 70s. He obviously made Thief and had success with that with James Caan, and he had this script, but it was a long script. It was like a 3 hour, you know, it was like 180 page script, for Heat, and originally he'd offered it to Walter Hill to direct, and Walter Hill didn't want to do it, passed on it for whatever reason, and it sat around, and Michael Mann carried on with his career and researching other projects and knocking out all these other films, and he got the opportunity to, as I said, do this as a TV movie, as a proposed pilot. But obviously what that meant was he had to cut lots of subplots and whatever out. So he had to sort of condense the film down to something that could sort of fill a 90-minute TV slot. Okay. So he went ahead and did this. I mean, just to give it some context, because often, again, at film school, we talked a lot about actors and performance, and quite often they would play that famous sat across each other at a table scene between De Niro and Pacino, which is often used. Loads of actors use it for their show reels, etc. And they play the same version of the scene from the TV version, and people are always like, "Oh, this isn't so good," and whatever. But just to give it a bit of context, Heat had 6 months of pre-production and was a 107-day shoot. Okay, LA Takedown had 10 days of pre-production, and they shot the whole thing in 19 days. So, okay, I know it's half the length story-wise as well, but obviously that puts it into a bit of context. This was done. And the other thing I wanted to say about this, and it's funny, it's something that's changed nowadays, but back in the sort of late 80s, this was very much the case. And Michael Mann, I think, has always looked at it that way. This was of a time when television and film, although being sort of, although television is kind of a younger sibling to film, in terms of actors and production and things of this nature, the lines were more blurred than they are nowadays. Or sorry, the lines nowadays are more blurred, should I say. So there was more of a delineation between film and television. And, Michael Mann often talks about the fact he likes to use, the 2:35 aspect ratio. And of course, back then you couldn't do that on television. It was all 4:3, and the screens, before high def and widescreen and large screens were so much different. So it was very much, a different medium, certainly different budgets and different schedules. But also, you look at the actors, and nowadays we have film stars that are in TV shows and vice versa. But, back then, we were talking sort of TV actors, like in this, you've got Alex MacArthur playing the character that De Niro would go on to play. Now, Alex MacArthur had appeared in the Papa Don't Preach Madonna video as a boyfriend, and he'd just come off the back of some successful TV movies called Desperado, which were Western movies and stuff. But this production was on a much different scale, even though essentially the story and the characters, even though some of the names have changed, is the same blueprint for what later would become Heat, which many regard as an amazing film.
I didn't know that he had written the script already and that it had been longer, because what it felt like watching it was that he'd done LA Takedown and he went, actually, I think I need more time with these characters. I need to sort of, give them a bit more space, give them a bit more breathing room, because it's just very, the Chris character that's played by Val Kilmer in Heat, plays a bigger part,
much bigger
part than he does in this. In this, he's, I think also Waingrove's character is sort of he kind of is pivotal, but he doesn't seem to be such the glaring threat that he is in the film.
Yeah.
And also, you don't have the character of the broker, whose stocks they stole, and who has a keen interest at getting back at Robert De Niro's gang and stuff. I mean, other things as well. comparing this film to Heat was the fact that there's a scene. There's the scene where Hannah is talking to his girlfriend, and in Heat he's just come back from seeing finding the dead girl, and sort of hugging the mother.
Mm-hmm.
And he sort of does that speech about how, he's got to stay sharp, and she's saying about how they're passing each other. Yet in LA Takedown, all that dialogue is given to the girlfriend. And it was very, you could just sort of, you could say, oh, well, he's not, that doesn't quite work, so I'll change that and I'll do this. And that's what it felt like watching LA Takedown,
Mm-hmm.
that, it was a dry run. I mean, also how they get into the famous coffee scene in Heat is
way cooler. Yeah.
It's so stupid in LA Takedown.
Yeah.
I mean, they literally bump into each other in a car park, and they do the whole thing where they go for their guns, but there's so many people around, which is hilarious from a point of view that when the robbery takes place, they're still shooting at each other with the public around. So that just makes no sense at all.
Yeah. No, absolutely. I mean, there are scenes that take place at night in Heat, which are daytime scenes, I guess, because of their shooting schedule or whatever in a LA Takedown. But yeah, I mean, it is interesting. I know this is fact. This is not just something read. I actually saw an interview with Michael Mann about this, and he does say how Heat was always like 180-page script that he had to pare down to come up with LA Takedown. And obviously, as you rightly said, they took out subplots with the gambling thing, with the Val Kilmer character, and a lot of other stuff had to go, by the wayside, even though essentially the sort of nuts and bolts of the plot is exactly the same. It's just that a lot of the character stuff and the subplots and the characterization is sadly missing from this, and as a result, the film suffers for it. I think it does feel like a sort of cheap dry run of it.
Well, I have to say the actor who plays Vincent Hanna, Scott Plank, I think his name is actually very apt because he's very wooden in this film.
He sadly died a few years back. Actually, he died quite young. So but no, no, I agree. He's not. You can see where the Vincent Hanna, Al Pacino character had come from, but you're right. Scott, didn't quite have the sort of charisma and whatever. They're a lot younger. I mean, what's interesting is that those two key characters in this are like in their late 20s, early 30s, whereas obviously in Heat, De Niro and Pacino were what in their 50s, I guess, or 40s. Late 40s or whatever.
No, 40s,
yeah. So there's a little bit of difference, but no, I just think it's interesting, how this sort of genesis became the basis for that. Because I remember, I mean, for me, Heat, when that came out in what was that, 95 was Heat? Yeah, it was like 8 years after this film, wasn't it? I remember that was just before I was starting film school, and I was actually working in Miami on a cruise ship, for sort of legal visa reasons. And my good friend, then my cabin mate Tony, who, by the way, listens to this podcast, so I've got to give Tony a thank you for that. He's gone back and sort of revisited all the old episodes, so hopefully he's listening and he's hearing that I'm giving him a shout out. But no, my friend Tony, and
so hello Tony.
Yeah, hello Tony. So no, he and I we went to see this because obviously we knew it was Pacino and De Niro and it was a Michael Mann film, but we had no idea it was like a 3-hour movie. And the trouble was, when we were in port, we were literally only in for like, well, barely 3 hours, 3.5 hours at the most. And I remember that we had to, as soon as the end credits, when we were riveted throughout the film because it was so great, as soon as the end credits came up, we sort of looked, realized what the time was. We had to jump in a taxi and leg it, and they were literally pulling the gangplank from the dock in onto the cruise ship as we ran up. Unfortunately, you know, the security guys knew us and they let us sort of jump on. But yeah, it was madness. I had no idea I was going to see a 3-hour film, but it didn't feel like it. You know, it was it was you know, interesting and compelling and well acted, and you know, as I said, was definitely up there sort of for a movie heaven contender. But by comparison, LA Takedown, you know, for all its production restrictions, you know, is definitely movie hell by comparison, I think.
Oh god, yeah. I mean, just as we're taking trips down memory lane, I saw Heat around at my friend's Kevin at his place, and he used to watch that film so much. I mean, he'd constantly watching it. I remember every time we come round, he'd have it on. So I'd sit and watch it with him, and sort of got to know the film that way. But yeah, no, Heat's a great film. LA Takedown, I think, is a great, you know, dry run, and but in comparison, it's really not very good.
No. But interesting, and you know, fortunate that he was able to do this and still get to make Heat as well, you know.
Well, I mean, he just come off doing Last of the Mohicans, which was a big hit for him, so you know, so he had the power to sort of do that and get the actors that he wanted.
Yeah, and thank God he did, because, you know, otherwise we wouldn't have Heat. So yes.
So right, moving on to my pick for movie hell. So this is a film I saw when I was a child. I saw this back in the 80s, and at the time, it scared me, but also baffled me. So as an adult, it sort of baffles me. It's one of these films where, you know, each time I watch it, I just keep hoping that there's a good film there, and it never delivers. And it has the promise. Within this film, there is a promise of a really good horror film, and the film is The Keep.
Based on a novel, right? I believe.
That's right, yes. It's based on the F. Paul Wilson novel about a troop of Nazi soldiers who go to a keep in Romania, and they are sort of picked off by a supernatural force. So it's well, it has a troubled production history. There are reports of a 3-hour cut.
Yes.
And watching this film, you can tell there are lots of things missing. So I'll just sort of run off the cast list, because this is a hell of a cast list. You've got Scott Glenn, you got
Jürgen Proganov. Yes.
Thank you, Jürgen Prochnow. You've got Gabriel Byrne, and you've got Ian McKellen in a horror film.
Indeed, as well as Alberta Watson, who I was really sad to discover actually died earlier this year. So because, you know, she was Miss, you know, in Nikita and 24 and all those kind of shows. She always had those, you know, strong female character authority figure roles, and yeah, I was shocked to see when I was looking at the credits for this that she died back in March, and she was only like, I think 58 or something. So very sad.
Oh, very sad. The story is about you know, a troop of Nazis who they believe that they've won the war, that, you know, that they're, you know, the rulers of everything they see, and they've been given guard duty of this keep, which is in the Romanian mountains, and they are warned by the caretaker of the keep not to disturb the nickel crosses that adorn the whole of place. And of course, to the soldiers, you know, being greedy little bastards, they think one of the crosses is silver because it starts to glow. and they release this creature. I believe his name is Molslar.
That's right, yes.
And he's played by Michael Carter. Now, if you don't know who Michael Carter is, you may know the character he played in Return of the Jedi, and he played Bib Fortuna.
Oh, right. I didn't even realise that. That's cool. Interesting. Okay.
Yeah. And it's a very interesting creature design until we get to the very end. Yeah. I mean, I like the bit where you could see the bones and sinew and the glowing face. That was a really good look. Molsar is kind of using he is sort of rebuilding himself from this evil that the Nazis have brought into the village, because Jürgen Prochnow,
yeah. Yeah.
Prochnow.
Yeah. He'd come off this was his first Hollywood film, right? He'd come off of Das Boots. Yes. And yeah.
Das Boots, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, anyway, he calls for reinforcements and gets Gabriel Byrne's SS commander, who takes it to start, executing the villagers, because he believes there to be rebels there. And this just feeds Molsar and makes him more human. I think if his transformation was more complete, that he would actually look like a human and not the sort of black figure you see at the end. Because Scott Glenn's character, he is I believe the owner of the keep. I mean, it's never really, I mean, this is the thing about this film, is nothing's really concrete.
It's a bit disjointed. Yes. Yeah.
It is. And this is where I say there's things missing. But it turns out that Scott Glenn, his character he's connected to the keep, and if Molsar is evil, then he's good, and he's there to sort of stop Molsar from escaping the keep. Now, Ian McKellen plays this doctor who's also a Jew, and also has he has a disease where he's older than his actual age. A bit like J.J. Sebastian in Blade Runner.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That he has a disease where he is older than his actual age is. And the priest in the village says that he is the only one who could tell him what's happening, can read this ancient dialect that's been left on one of the walls. And so you get a really good performance from Ian McKellen in this film. And but the thing is, so 1 minute I think they're in like a waiting area, or it's supposed to be a concentration camp. I don't know. You can't really tell.
That's right. Yeah, I think it is supposed to be a concentration camp, isn't it? Yeah.
But they're talking about moving on and where they're going. They talk about fields, and yet Gabriel Byrne takes great delight telling them that they actually go into chimneys and they never come out again.
Yeah.
So events happen, and
or not, as the case may be.
And you get like this final showdown at the end where all the Nazis have been killed, and Molsar is going to be released. There's a talisman that Ian McKellen's character has to take out, because Molsar can't physically take it out himself, and if he's released into the world, then the rule of man would be over. And of course it doesn't it's
no, I know what you mean. I mean, I think it was a bit of an ill-fated production by the sounds of things, because this was I guess Michael Mann's second feature, right? He'd done Thief, and this was the next one, I think, wasn't it? Was it?
That's right.
Yeah. Obviously there was a bit of a gap in between there, but and I've not read the novel, but from what I can tell, because his original cut was like 210 minutes, I'm guessing he kind of did a fairly true adaptation of the novel, I'm guessing. But obviously the film itself 96 minutes, you know, there's so much lost in there that I think this is the reason I watched it. I mean, I remember seeing it back in the day on VHS, simply because
Mm.
after Manhunter and whatever, I was kind of wanting to see everything Michael Mann did, and this was one of them. And I remember at the time, you know, thinking, oh wow, you know, he's done a horror film, it's a bit different, you know, and I saw it, and you know, I kind of didn't mind it at the time, but I did rewatch it for this, and I have to say I found it quite hard going, to be perfectly honest with you, and it's not coherent at all, you know, which is very
No.
odd for Michael Mann. I think Michael Mann may have kind of distanced himself from this as well, over the years. I don't know the true story behind that.
I think this is I've read a few things online where they say that he has distanced himself, and that the reason why you can't get this on DVD or Blu-ray is that he won't let it be released, even though it's on Netflix.
Yeah, well, that's where I
But
saw
there's
it.
also
Yeah,
and there's also talk about that there's problems with the rights to the music, because it has this very interesting score by Tangerine Dream, and I I think one of the problems with the film is that the sound mix in it is terrible. The music drowns everything out, even though there is dialogue going on. I mean, the bit with the two soldiers who let Mulsar out, you can hear that, you can see that they're talking, but you can't hear what they're saying.
yeah. Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah, that bit, which is obviously a key scene, is. I mean, it's obvious what's happening, but it's quite confusing in terms of, like you said, you've got a lot of sound design, in terms of Tangerine Dream score and whatever in there. But yeah, it is. I mean, I think this is one of the problems this film has, is from what I can tell, and the little that I can find out about it. It was one of those films that wasn't really finished off, as such. Like, obviously, you got quite a good cast, even though it was fairly early in some of their careers. But you've got a great cast and a great story idea. But
Mm.
I read things that apparently the guy who was doing the special effects died before the film was finished, and Michael Mann ended up having, that's not really his area, but ended up having to do a lot of the post-production visual effects stuff himself. Obviously, you know, you've got this issues with the music rights. You've got obviously lots of deleted footage and stuff from this, and I guess the creature didn't turn out the way that it was originally envisioned or whatever. So yeah, as a result, you've got a film that doesn't really gel, and you know, which is a very odd thing to say about a Michael Mann film. But you know, in this case,
Yeah.
it doesn't. You know, I found it a bit hard to sit through, actually, even though it was only 96 minutes. It's kind of like, it was losing me a little bit this time round, I found.
Yeah. I mean, it's a film I keep coming back to. I've seen this quite a few times now, and I keep coming back to it because I keep hoping that it's going to be
You
good,
want to
you know?
like it. No, I get it. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's just, as I say, it's one of these films that I saw from my childhood, and you know, it freaked me out a bit. I mean, the bit with the two soldiers as a kid absolutely freaked the hell out of me, and you know, the lights coming out of the walls and
Oh yeah,
stuff, that was
that
freaky.
was well
I
done.
have to say, the production design in this film is amazing. You've never seen anything quite like it before. The keep itself is quite a thing. I mean, they filmed this in a quarry in Wales.
Wow, is it in Wales? I didn't realise that. Okay,
It's in
bloody
Wales,
hell.
yeah.
Okay.
It's one of the problems they were having was the fact that it kept raining all the time, so they had to stop shooting and wait for the rain to finish and stuff. So hence why there's some scenes where it starts off dry and then it's wet, and you know, and they just so many delays.
Yeah, it just has this very sort of disjointed feel about it. You know, what's there is not bad, but yeah, it doesn't feel complete. I think that is the thing. It doesn't feel like it's all there, quite literally. And you know, it's weird. I mean, I hear there's a Kickstarter project or something for or some sort of crowd-funded project for a documentary about this. Is that right? Do you know about that?
Yes, that's correct. You sort of
Oh, sorry.
I was mentioning this, but as you brought it up, yes, there is a documentary called World War II Fairy Tale: The Making of Michael Mann's The Keep.
Oh wow.
They're doing an Indiegogo campaign, and it starts this November, according to the website.
Oh right, okay, that could be an interesting watch then.
I think I would be really interested in seeing that, because it's, as I say, it's one of these films where it could have been so much better than it was, and I think a case of studio interference. Though there is one trivia fact that always makes me smile, and the sort of the small armored vehicle that you see Gabriel Byrne in when he enters the village was actually used later on in Allo Allo.
Okay, yeah. Love it. Oh, nice.
So yeah.
Oh, that's good. That's good. I mean,
so from one bad
yeah,
World War II film to a bad World War II
indeed.
comedy.
I mean, I don't know whether this ever will get a release or a director's cut or anything. Probably not if Michael Mann doesn't want to sort of be tied to it anymore.
Well, I'll say this. It might be a case of that. It might be released one day, like with Clockwork Orange in this country, when after Kubrick died, the film came out because the self-imposed ban was over. But with this, we don't know. I mean, I don't think.
I mean, is it even finished? Is the question. You know what I mean? That 210-minute edit. Does that actually? Is it finished off? We don't know, I guess, do we?
Well, maybe, because back in the 80s, they had this practice where films on TV would be longer.
That's right.
Than they were in the cinema. I mean, there's over in the States, when they showed Superman the movie, there was a lot more footage in there than there is in the final film.
Yeah, so, Star Trek the motion picture as well. There's a lot of extra.
Yeah,
believe it or not.
I mean, I've seen the extended ending where you see let me just look at Alberta Watson go back into the keep and find Scott Glenn's character alive, because the end of this version, it's a very sad ending,
right?
Because they've had like a brief love affair, and now she's lost him. I have to say, I mean, good on old Scott Glenn. I mean, he meets a girl, 2 minutes later they're shacked up.
Absolutely, yes, yeah, and the yes, yeah, that bit was easier to sit through, but yeah. Anyway, so yeah. But this whole, they're calling it a World War II fairy tale. I mean, is that like a quote that had come from Michael Mann himself? Do you know? I mean, is that how he was describing this film?
I don't know, possibly. I mean, it certainly plays like a fairy tale in some sense. I mean, it's just, it would be. I would love to see a restored version of this. I'd like to see, something close to the 3-hour mark. As I say, there is a better story in there. I mean, it's a bit like LA Takedown and Heat. So, we got the 90-minute version of The Keep, like LA Takedown, but there's a longer version out there. Maybe this is a film worth remaking.
Yeah, well, it's an interesting topic, and because of when it's set, it's kind of it's the sort of film you could make any time. So it's well, why not? Interesting. I mean, I agree. I can see why you picked it for Movie Hell. It's very unusual in his body of work that something doesn't feel finished or quite there, and this is definitely the film of his that is definitely not quite complete, and it feels that way. So one can only hope that we might see something in the future. But
well, I'm certainly looking forward to learning more about it through this documentary when it comes out. So at least we have that.
Well, hopefully that will get made.
I think so. I mean, I've been following it on Facebook, and they've been doing a lot of interviews. So, I think it's just getting access to footage is always the main thing.
And has Mann been involved in that? Do you know, or is he like completely nothing to do with it?
No idea. I haven't been following it that
Right.
much, and if if it's correct what you say that he doesn't like this film, then I don't think he's going to talk about it. I think he's going to do like a Fincher and Alien 3.
Yeah, I don't know that for a fact. There's only stuff I've read online, and as we said earlier, you never know whether whether it's all true or some of it's speculation. So, but yeah. I mean, interesting to see some of these actors that we now see in everything younger.
Yeah.
Like Syrian Mckellen, for example. And interesting to see some of these earlier roles for Jürgen Proganov and Gabriel Byrne and those guys, and Scott Glenn, absolutely. So but yeah, an interesting film, a really unusual one when you look at Michael Mann's canon of work. This is kind of an oddball, isn't it, in there, really?
Yeah.
So.
Well, I think that's a good place to sort of end the podcast on. So, we're going to keep the Michael Mann theme running into the next episode, which is our extra. We're going to talk to Chris Rogers, who was also going to be on the Michael Mann podcast with Rob and Clive. And we're going to talk about a film which it's a Marmite film. It's one of Michael Mann's films that a lot of people like and a lot of people hate. And Chris knows a lot about this film, so we're going to have him on board next week on the podcast, and we're going to talk about Miami Vice.
Yeah, and for once, I've actually got my my wish come true, because often in these, particularly with directors like this, where we only just sort of scratch the surface and there's other things we want to talk about, and I say, oh, that's a whole nother podcast. Well, guess what? For this one, we have got a whole nother podcast, so that's great. Look forward to it.
Right, well, we'll finish this off in our sort of usual manner. So, Keith, where can we find your work?
Okay, if you go to YouTube and put in British Eyles, spelled Eyles, they have my films there. I was looking the other day, and nobody's ever commented on any of them, good or bad. So, please watch it, share it, comment on it. Whatever feedback is always good. So please do.
Indeed, but unlike Keith, on our YouTube channel, we actually do have a lot of feedback. There's been a lot of interesting conversations about our previous podcasts on YouTube. So check out, just search for Movie Heaven, Movie Hell, and you'll see a lot of those comments. And please feel free to sort of join in the conversation. Also, you can find my work at independentrunnings.com. And you can follow us on Facebook and Twitter. Just search for Movie Heaven, Movie Hell. Well, that just leaves me to say thank you for listening. And join us next week where we delve deeply into Miami Vice.
I cannot wait. See you then.
I'm just looking at IMDb and the frequently asked questions, and it says here that the reason why it wasn't released on DVD, the alleged story so far was that Paramount was going to release it on DVD back in 2004, but there were two reasons that have stopped them from doing so. First, the studio wasn't able to obtain the rights to the soundtrack by Tangerine Dream. Second is that Michael Mann, who has publicly disowned the film, forced the studio not to release it.
Oh, well, there you go. Now we know. So, time is luck, as Michael Mann would say. 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 As Michael Mann would say.